Perfect.
Congrats on being liberated.
I appreciate that. It's funny that when I got fired on my day off, like I always say that it's like I watch Friday. It's one of my favorite movies. And he said, "How you gonna get fired on your day off?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a good question. I got fired on my day off." But it did not take long for my husband and I to lift ourselves up and say, you know what, we can either be mad, we can either be sad, or we can just be determined. And we already had a production company. We work on documentary projects, and we've EP'd a bunch of really great projects. And we were like, we had the company, we had the equipment. I was already doing the readout using mostly our equipment in the basement of our place anyway. So we're like, let's just flip the script and let's just do our thing. And we just decided to stop, drop, and roll. We didn't even miss a beat. We started thinking about and figuring out the Joy Reid Show like within 48 hours.
How hard was it to get back up on that horse? I mean, as important as a voice you had, I can only imagine how you felt on when you got pushed out of MSNBC, and to me, what was just an awful situation in every way.
It was awful. I mean, the thing about it was such a surprise. I think if I had seen it coming, it would have been different. You know what I mean? Like if I had been sort of in warfare with the management at MSNBC and had been like, yeah, we're about to go, it'd be different. But we kind of felt like we were in a good place. Mark, the craziest thing about it is a week before I was fired, we were emailing with the president of MSNBC and with the PR team about our winning the NAACP Image Award. Like literally a week before, we were talking about taking, her out to lunch or dinner, myself and my executive producer, to celebrate her, becoming the new president of MSNBC. So we thought, we were in a good place. I mean, management had always been, little, negative about my social media. They didn't love it. But if I had thought it was coming, it'd be different. And then even worse, even if it happened, and again, I don't own MSNBC. I don't even own stock in MSNBC. So I can't decide. They can put whoever they want on TV. It's not my airwaves, it's theirs. But even when it happened, never for one moment did it occur to me that they would touch my staff. I'll be honest. I've lost a show before. I had a show, the Reid Report, in 2014. We got canceled. They lopped off the host and kept it moving. The staff wasn't touched. So if I had thought my staff was going to be laid off, I think I would have been even more upset. But I had no idea that was happening. That was the worst surprise out of all of it.
And that's the part that I think people sometimes don't get. I hate when I look on social media and I watch people cheering for the firing of people. But I think the part that people miss out on is that it's not just us getting fired. It's people, either producers, it's bookers, it's people who don't even necessarily have a political point of view that they're advocating through the work they're doing anyway. They're just working. They're going to work every day trying to feed their families, and now they're often out of a job. And for me, as somebody who's been fired a lot, that's been the toughest part for me, is watching those people lose their jobs.
Yeah. Oh, no, 100%. And I'll be honest with you, you were at CNN, you've been at other networks. I've literally only worked my career at NBC, either at NBC Local or at MSNBC. And even the Griot, when I was working for the Griot, was owned by NBC News. Like we were, an NBC property. And I'll be honest with you, I worked for Radio 1 for a while. That was the only time when ending a show ended all of our jobs, right? I was a producer / host at Radio 1. Yeah, when they sold Radio 1 and sold the talk network, we were all out of jobs, and everyone was. But we, equally. But at NBC, traditionally, they didn't do it like CNN. CNN, they wipe everybody out, as you know. I mean, if they get rid of a show, everybody loses their job. That's not the way. And NBC's culture, to give some credit, to Phil Griffin, they, and that's the only person I worked under. And the culture which we were used to is that they can make decisions about changing a show, and they never touch the staff. Nobody lost a job. The only time we saw crew lose jobs was COVID. And that was unfortunate because they just decided, oh, we can do these shows with 3 people instead of 12, so they just didn't bring people back. But I was not prepared for my staff to lose their job. It didn't occur to me until we started realizing that this is what was happening. And, I have to big up Rachel Maddow for speaking to it really directly,
Yes, she did.
She came scorched earth because, and what she was saying was true, because I think what people don't understand, it wasn't just my staff. It was Alex Wagner's whole staff. It was Rachel's whole staff. It was Jonathan Capart's whole staff. And it was Eamon Moyadeen's entire staff. All of them got doged. They all had to reapply for their jobs. We're talking more than 100 experienced, brilliant producers all had to justify their presence and reapply for their jobs. That is not the way things work. And so that was the really worse than what happened to me. I'll be fine. It was much worse what happened to them.
You know, you mentioned Ayman Mohyeldin. We also saw other people, you know, at MSNBC.
Katie Fang. I forgot Katie Fang. Her whole show wiped out.
Absolutely. I mean, and then there was Mehdi Hassan, who had a show on Peacock and was a contributor. I mean, when I look at all the movement around there, I do notice some interesting threads and patterns here. Lot of brown and black folk gone. A lot of people with certain political positions gone. With a little bit of distance from it, how do you make sense of the moves that MSNBC made? They're going to say it was ratings, it was budget. We know the company line. What's your sense?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't ratings. I mean, and we had just had a ratings meeting like 2 weeks before that. The week before we had the meeting about before we were emailing about the NAACP Image Award, you know, my executive producer had the ratings meeting in which we were told we're doing fine. We were actually, everyone was down. And I think this is the thing, and I said it on the Breakfast Club, I'll say it to you, and that people need to understand about the way that cable news ratings work. There's always a top show, which is Rachel Maddow. She's like the lead show, and everyone has less numbers than her. So no one had 2 million people a night. That's Rachel. But everyone sort of rises and falls kind of together at whatever level you were at versus her 2 million. We all kind of were going up and down together. We all skyrocketed when Kamala Harris became the nominee. I mean, you could literally see it in the minute by minutes and in the daily ratings. The interest in her pushed all our ratings up. At one point, myself, was getting 1.7, sometimes 1.8 million people watching on a given night. Like, we were getting huge numbers, and that means Rachel was getting 2.3, because it's a scale.
Yeah.
And then after she lost, the bottom dropped out. Everyone went down. And the network, and I'm giving you an estimate, I think the network went down like maybe 52%. We went down like 46. So we went down, but we went down by less because we had just this core following, particularly among Black viewers, that were just not going to leave no matter what. And so we went down, but we went down less. And so there were shows like, Morning Joe and all these shows that went down far more. So if it was ratings, they would have had to wipe everybody out because everybody went down. So it wasn't that. And we were actually then building back, and we were clawing back our numbers in a way that management was telling us was good. I have text messages of them saying, you guys are doing great. So it's like, if it was ratings, they would have had a ratings crisis meeting with us. That didn't happen.
Yeah, they're not afraid to have those come to Jesus moments when they say, like, look, you're in your lap, get these ratings up. That wasn't it.
1,000%. I mean, after Ukraine, I'll give you an example. After I said on my show that the reason Americans could relate to Ukrainians in a way that they didn't relate to Palestinians, that Ukrainians are white. And so watching white people get their schools bombed was, hit different. That hit our ratings. I mean, it definitely, we could see the loss of white viewers from that moment that I said that. It was like when Obama said, my son could have been Trayvon, and you saw the bottom drop out of his poll numbers. We definitely got hit. And I had ratings meetings with our bosses about it, and we did a whole ratings meeting where we talked about, we have a white voter problem, a white viewer problem, I should say, because, you could see the moment that happened was when I said that. So people would react immediately if that was number. So it doesn't track to say that it was numbers, ratings. What does track is what was consistently problematic about what I was doing, at least as far as what I could tell from the feedback I was getting, was two things. It was the way we were covering Trump, which is very hard hitting, and everyone at MSNBC was hard hitting. Everyone was covering Trump the same way because we're all genuinely fearful of fascism. Like, we genuinely are anti-fascists, and so we were all covering in the same way. But I did it I'm probably snarkier, if I'm being honest,
a little bit.
They didn't love the snark. It was like, less snark, less name calling. Don't call Ted Cruz Cancun Cruz, even though, I mean, he is Cancun Cruz.
My favorite still comes, but yeah.
Right. I mean, he literally was in Europe during the floods that just happened in Texas. Like, he's never there when bad things happen.
Right.
So they were like, we don't like the name calling. We used to have a thing called the craziest damn thing in the world. It was one of our segments. They were like, maybe too spicy. And also, I'm a Black woman, so I mean, I'm sure it makes him angrier, when I say things. So that was one bucket. And then the other bucket was Gaza. And you know this better than anyone. There was a deep discomfort in the mainstream media period, when it came to covering Israel after October 7, 2023. Everything changed for everyone in the news business about what you could say and not say and how you could say it. That's just a fact.
Did you ever have any like serious meetings about things you were saying? Because you were one of the voices who was actually being courageous and honest about what was happening in Gaza. Were you ever called in like, hey, don't do that? Was there ever, did you ever have a sense that you were hitting a third rail?
So I will tell you, and I have not talked about this. I've given a lot of interviews about this, but I haven't really gotten into it. I had meetings with, that where I was told that something I posted on social media, someone had complained about it in an HR way. Like, there's somebody had formally complained that I liked a post about Gaza. And these, I wasn't liking like crazy posts. I was liking posts about children being killed, and bombed, or about land being stolen or homes being stolen in the West Bank. And
just to be clear for the people clipping out of context, you were liking posts that were critiquing those things.
They were critiquing those things, and when liking, I know it's such a weird verbiage that you use. It's essentially what you're saying is there's a post that says this terrible thing is happening and you hit like, which is the only thing you can hit. Unfortunately, like isn't what you're really feeling about it, but you're hitting like because you're saying this is something that's resonating with me. Now, I may not have reposted it on my own social, but I may have hit like or put it in my stories, etc. And I would get constant pushback about it. Constant pushback. I mean, the only other time I've gotten more pushback, and we didn't have social media back then, about that I felt more pushback about anything that I was putting out into the public sphere was during the Iraq War. I was working in local news during the Iraq War, and I quit the business because of the pressure that was on us as journalists. And I was just a digital journalist at the time. And so I wasn't even getting it as bad as people who were on air. You couldn't criticize George W. Bush. You couldn't criticize the war. You had to put that flag pin on and rah and root for them to bomb Iraq. It was so insane that I left news. It was so bad. The only other time I felt that much pressure around a story was Gaza. If you liked a Facebook post or reposted a Facebook post or talked about it in a way that gave too much context, you felt that, oh my goodness, this is really not wanted.
If October 7th doesn't happen, are you still working there?
Probably. Maybe. I mean, I don't know, because again, I can't read their minds. You know what I mean? I don't know what they wanted. I don't know what the new people came in. MSNBC became Spinco and it was a different company. Maybe they just didn't want me, period. Like, I don't really know, but I do know that something palpably changed in the vibe at work. People, and I'll give you an example. People who were posting, not just liking, but posting things very pro-Israel, to my knowledge, did not get the same pushback. Like, there was not the same prohibition, you know what I mean? But it felt like when it came to what we were doing, there was more scrutiny in the way we were describing things, and I feel like maybe because I am a global South person myself, I mean, as a Black person, we have a different empathy toward other global South people when they are suffering. The same that we as Black people have a different empathy toward Black people who are being shot by police. And so we're going to come at that story from a different angle and in a different way and with different kinds of empathies. And I think that's not always received very well in the news business when it comes to Palestinians or really to Muslims or Arabs, period.
We're in a moment now where Donald Trump is running roughshod over the Constitution, over democracy, over all these things. You warned us about this. You were begging people to pay attention to this. It's happening exactly the way many of us feared it would. What do we do?
You know what? I still remember when Mehdi Hassan and I were the two people saying Trump was a fascist and people thought we were insane.
Yeah.
I mean, the two of us. And Malcolm Nance, I think the three of us said Trump is a fascist. He's going to destroy the country. He does not believe in democracy. And people thought we were hysterical. We were called, I mean, if I pull up the old Fox headlines from the time, we were it's like as if we were mad people. And, now it's playing out exactly the way fascism always plays out. There's nothing new under the sun. These people all do the same thing. They do it the same way. And in his case, Donald Trump is not a bright guy. Okay, I wrote a Trump book. I interviewed a lot of Trump affiliated people. Not a single person ever told me they thought he was smart. Nobody. And these are people who liked him. You know,
Yeah.
people who were with him. No one ever told me he was a good guy. I didn't have a single person tell me they thought he was a good man. And these are people, again, who voted for him, rooted for him, and liked him. Didn't think he was smart. They thought he was lucky.
Yeah.
And so what he has in this second term is not some brilliant playbook. He's not going to write Mein Kampf. You know, he's not capable of that kind of deep thought, but he had a plan already written for him. He just had to stand back and let Elon Musk and Stephen Miller and Mark Homan and all the rest implement what was in Project 2025. And it was almost Scooby-Doo villain level wild how they literally published what they were going to do.
Yes.
People still didn't believe it.
Yeah. It was almost too obvious.
Yes.
No, what do you think they really just put a plan in a project in a book and put it out and told you? Yeah.
Yes. And by the way, Project 2025 is really not that much different than Project 1980, 1984, 1980. They've been publishing this since I was in high school.
Yes.
They've been trying to do these exact same things since I was in high school. They just couldn't do it because they didn't have a charismatic enough leader on top of the Republican Party to let them get away with it. Even Reagan he didn't have quite the level of cult-like charisma to get a majority of white people to give away everything they won in the 20th century. Trump has that magic because unlike Reagan, who was a B-level television host, a television star, Trump was on our air for 15 straight years hit TV star. And so people thought they knew him. They felt a comfort with him and a knowledge of him that they didn't even feel with Reagan. Reagan was like a star on a different level. He was like a star that was approachable. And this dude was the perfect setup for the same people who've been wanting to repeal Medicaid, repeal Medicare, make the poor pay for all the taxes, gut the taxation of the rich, make them pay. They wanted the same thing. They just didn't have the right guy. Now they got the right guy.
For those who still don't get it, how dire is this circumstance? How scary should this moment be to us? Because the problem is Democrats have said the sky is falling all the time for the last 40 years. There ain't been a Republican in office or running for office who we haven't said is the biggest threat to democracy we've ever seen. This is different, but I think for some people they're not buying it.
They're not, because when I quit NBC, when I quit news on a local level, I did work in Democratic politics, and one of the wildest things, Mark, that I can recall from my time at MSNBC is sitting in one of those meetings. You have those like behind the scenes meetings with a campaign, and listening to, at the time, the Biden campaign use the same talking points I used to use when I was a press secretary in 2004.
Wow.
They haven't changed anything about their playbook. They were saying the same things. And we as Democratic, back when I worked in Democratic campaign politics for two campaigns, we always say this election is the most important election of your life. We say that every 4 years. And so at a certain point, people don't believe it anymore.
Yeah.
People don't believe it anymore. And so it was hard to convince people that the guy from The Apprentice, who they felt like they knew and they felt like was their friend from TV, and the guy from Home Alone 2 was a dangerous fascist. People just didn't believe it. They didn't believe it in 2016 when they had Hillary Clinton, who they didn't like and had been taught to hate her for 30 years. And in 2024, for whatever reason, even though he proved to be a failure as president and let 1 million people die of COVID, they didn't believe it. They were just like, he's going to give me money. So I think we're in a really dangerous situation because we still have a third of the people who are in the cult. I think we have a third of people who are just not paying attention and don't even know half this crap is happening. They don't even know what's in that big billionaire bailout bill. They have no idea they're about to lose their Medicaid. They have no idea their kids are going to lose Head Start. It's going to hit them blindside when they don't get no tax on tips when that doesn't happen. They think that's going to happen. They have no idea. Yeah. And then you have a third of people who are terrified and who are trying to fight it. And that third isn't enough to change the country back. And what he's dismantling is going to be really hard to rebuild. I will tell you, I was at the Brookings Institute and I was doing an event at Brookings, and a guy came up to me at the end shaking and begging to have 5 minutes with me. And we were trying to leave. And he said, please just give me 5 minutes. He had this really heavy accent. And he said, I'm from Poland. And this was before the election. And he said, please, please don't let what happened to my country happen to yours. Don't let him win, because if he wins, it's going to be so hard to get rid of him, harder than it was for us. It took them 8 years to get rid of theirs. And he said, let me describe to you what it's like living under an autocracy. And he started talking about the things that were happening when their autocrat was in place. And he said, America is so much more open and so much easier to manipulate. And he was scared. He was like, please don't let it happen. And we let it happen. So I'm nervous. I think we're coming to a point where Trump could declare a national emergency. We don't know if we're going to have free and fair elections anymore. I think poor people are going to suffer horribly. I think rural people are going to suffer horribly. I think people are going to die from a needless disease and illness. And I think they won't fully understand why. And you've seen the floods in Texas. There'll be more of that. And it's going to be bad. And we're not going to have fully free speech. I think the media they've been driven to their knees. These companies, media companies, they're not fighting. 60 Minutes gave in. God help us. So I'm concerned.
The one, I don't know if I call it a bright spot, but the one glimmer of hope that I've had is that Trump is a one-term president. Now, I'm keeping in mind what you just said, which is very serious, that, we're just assuming he's going to pass or transition power. But assuming he's willing to, does the Trump movement have the ability to move beyond Trump? Can a JD Vance or whoever carry the baton, or does this thing end when Trump is gone?
I mean, Trump is Jim Jones. It's a religious cult, and he's Jim Jones. It's not like Jim Jones Jr. could run that cult. You know what I mean? It is a cult around Trump, and in order for the cult to wrap itself around you, you have to literally be Donald Trump. And look, it's not the same, but I will say that, like, when I was doing elections, I did 2, elections in Florida, and then observed another 2. If Barack Obama himself was on the ballot, whole different electorate. People come out, they will stand in line for 18 hours to vote for this man.
Right.
Anybody else, they're not going to come, because there is just an Obama voter that it will only vote when Obama is on the ballot and will not vote even below the ballot. They will not vote down ticket, just Obama. Trump has those kind of voters. They are dedicated to him personally. They care more about him being happy than them being happy. They care more about him having what he wants than them having what they want. They will give up their health care. They will let their daughters be destroyed. They will let their families be destroyed. There's nothing he can do. He can drown them in Texas. He can take away their FEMA. He can do anything he wants to them. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a cult. And JD Vance, with his lack of charisma, he's just an asshole. He has no personality. He's the personality of Ron DeSantis.
Ooh.
So no, there's no one else who can run the cult. But the problem is there's the cult, and then there is just this propensity among white voters to vote for any Republican and to create a adherence to any Republican because they just hate Democrats and they don't care who Ted Cruz. No one likes Ted Cruz, but they'll vote for him any day of the week because he is not a Democrat and they don't care what he does to them. So that's my problem. It's not the cult. The cult will be gone. The worship of Trump will be gone. But that doesn't mean that 60% of white voters won't vote for the next god-awful Republican president.
So what's the answer here? I mean, Democrats occasionally are able to put forward someone who can be successful, but it often comes at the expense of truly progressive policy. How do we find a way to beat or surmount that obstacle of white people who just really would rather the candidate be white and really prefer the candidate rather be Republican, or prefer the candidate be Republican? How do we surmount that without compromising the political vision that we have?
So I think I have the one thing that's giving me hope right now, because my name is Joy, but it's quite ironic because I'm actually quite pessimistic about the country. Probably because my parents, came from countries where the average length of the presidential term was like 24 years. So you know what I mean. So I know this can happen because it, but I what gives me hope right now is Zorhan Mamdani. Like, this is actually the most hopeful thing that I've seen happen in a really long time, right? This guy who is not shying away from the fact that he's a democratic socialist, something that I, and there were some people who were yelling at me in the comments saying I helped facilitate this. Yeah, because I genuinely did not believe in 2016 that the United States would elect a democratic socialist. Like, that was my genuine analysis. This isn't some negative attitude I had personally against Bernie Sanders. I just was like, I lived in Florida for 14 years, and I'm telling you, the word socialist was like a curse word, and you could just simply not win the state of Florida. And I just didn't think you could really win a presidential election if you had socialist attached to your name. But that was in 2016. Before the tariff that are going to rip this country to shreds economically. Trump just announced tariffs on Japan. If you're a gamer, prepare to pay double for your gaming system and the games you love to play. It's about to go way up, way up. Your iPhone, way up. Okay, the pragmatic stuff you buy, you about to pay a lot more for it. Enough pain like that will make people even choose democratic socialism, relieve the pressure and the pain. And in New York, it's so expensive. It's so crazy. You can't even live there anymore like I did when I was young. And people are suffering. They're turning to this guy Mamdani because he's saying, I'll put some city-owned grocery stores, and I'll make your food cheaper. I'll make your rent cheaper. And they're like, okay, we don't care what you call yourself. And so I think the hope is people like him, the authenticity of an AOC, those kind of authentic politicians, I think actually can win on a local level. And I think that is the way we start to build. We have to get people beyond this binary of Democrats and Republicans.
Is there are we looking for too much purity? Because even when you say AOC, there's people, particularly, my viewers, who have been increasingly frustrated with AOC. And I've been frustrated with AOC for some of the choices she's made in the last year or two. Some people say she's just positioning herself for national office, and that comes at a price. Are our expectations too high? Mamdani can get elected in New York. I'm not sure he could become governor or president or someone like him with the same political agenda without making some adjustments. Even when he talked about the question of Israel, I mean, he made there were a few pieces of his statement that I didn't agree with. That I thought he was yielding a little too much ground to liberal Zionists. But again, I understood the bigger point he was trying to make, which was, don't be scared of me. I'm not a threat to Jewish people. I'm here for justice. I got this. I got the strategy. And there's an argument, hey, you got to do that to win. But there's a lot of people on the left who say, if the tree that bends too much is already broken. Like, what do you do?
Because and this is something, as somebody who I consider myself, very liberal. I consider myself a progressive, but I am very pragmatic progressive. You know what I mean? I just think that this country has a core resistance to too much compassion. The idea of people, even at the time, think about the debate over Obamacare. People really rose up against the idea of universal free healthcare. The idea that, people saw it as theft of doctors' labor. And you couldn't talk, and I'm talking about like Baroque people thought that, what I mean? Like, Americans have been trained into a very hyper-capitalist mentality. And it's so ingrained, even in people of color, even in Black and brown people. They deeply believe in this individualism that is the kind of, core principle of Americanness. And if you want who really believes it, immigrants coming from them, I'm telling you, there's a reason. Go look up who Candace Owens is. That lady's Jamaican. Her people are Jamaican. Go look up Byron Donalds. His people Jamaican. These immigrant people, even more so, they have this core belief in this like myth of American individualism. And so they are super capitalist. They are, and there's very hard to convince people to give that up for something that feels like it's giving my stuff to someone else. Americans are nice when they need to like raise money for like starving swelly belly kids in Africa. But when you say, will you help your neighbor get healthcare? They're like, hell no. So I don't know that on a national scale, you can elect somebody with way compassionate policies, because I just don't think this country is built for it. So I don't know. I think AOC is reading the room in that she's like, I have to bend in a certain way to make myself not seem like a terrifying, scary socialist just to get to first base. And I hate that that's the case, but I think it is.
All right, before you go, I want to pivot just really quickly to ask you about the show, because that's what I'm most excited about, honestly. I love what you're doing. Did you have a moment where you said, you know what, after MSNBC, I don't even want to do a show. I don't want to be up there, or were you like, I need to get on air as quick as possible?
You know what? I feel like for the first month or so, I was kind of in mourning. You know what I mean? I was so angry about, particularly, as I'm texting with my team and they're desperately looking for jobs, especially my executive producer who was with the company for 22 years.
My God.
And I'm seeing these people get cast aside in a way that I was just angry about, and I mean, honestly, that's why I said Rachel spoke for me, because we watched that live at our little going away party and we're cheering. We were like, this is crazy, and and so the first month I was angry, but I was also busy. I was trying to help people get jobs. I was like, who do I text to get this person on my staff a job and that person on my staff a job? And, reaching out to other anchors and being like, hey, do you need a booking producer, or can you take my people? So my first thing was like, I just need my people to have jobs because they have mortgages. Some of them have kids, some of them have been with the company forever. I'm like, this is so unfair, and then, so I was more focused on that. And then also my thing was, there's so much horrible stuff happening and I need to keep using my platform. Like, I need to keep weighing in on this. I don't want to just like vanish. So the first place that I went sort of emotionally was to Substack, because I'm a writer primarily. And so I just dug into my Substack, and it was almost my therapy, because I can write about this horror and still be able to express it rather than just hold it in. So I think, I'm not sure that I had a plan to say whether I wanted to be back on TV or whether I wanted to be in a television-like medium. I just knew that like using my voice is therapeutic for me. And I feel like I'm also of the school of like the Navalny school of resistance. You cannot resist silently. Like you actually have to resist loudly. And the louder we are, the more frightened the other side will become, and the more they'll realize that they cannot force us all to our knees. If we cannot fight on our knees. And so my only admonition to folks is we have to stand up and we have to scream out against this bullshit before it overtakes us. I've seen what it looks like. And I know, or I say I've seen, but I know what it looks like when you get overtaken by autocracy. I've been to countries that are autocratic. I've read about them. I've studied them. We cannot let this happen in America. We just cannot. We've been there before, by the way. We've been an apartheid state before. I don't think we want to go through it again.
Absolutely. Everybody, this is what the Joy Reid Show is all about. This kind of analysis, this type of depth. And you can say the word bullshit now. So and sometimes it just got to be said.
Mark, remember I got in trouble. I got in so much trouble when I accidentally dropped the F-bomb on Biden, because Biden, I said he was starting another effing war, and I didn't realize my mic was still on. I felt so bad.
That's still one of my favorite moments of yours.
I'm really not sorry that I said it.
Yeah, of course you're not. You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. I'm so glad you did that. And now we get to hear your analysis all the time. What for people who are used to the MSNBC show and they want more of you, I mean, they got you. But what's new? What should they expect that's different?
What I loved about, like, for instance, our show tonight, normally we have Bishop Barber, we would do our like Moral Mondays, and the most we could give Bishop was like 10 minutes was a lot. You know what I mean? You just had so little time. You had 1 hour. I always felt like I missed my weekend show because my weekend show was 2 hours. So I always had a little more time. And I always had 10 more questions after the segment was over that I could have gone on. Now I don't have to worry about that. Like, we could go on as long as we want. We went on for an hour and 15 minutes tonight. We got to really have a real sit down conversation like we're having right now. I could spend 20 minutes. I could spend half an hour with a guest. I can spend as long as I want and take a commercial break when I'm ready. You know what I mean? I love the ability to sit down and have a real lengthy conversation with somebody. That's something we really couldn't do unless we gave somebody the whole show, like we do with Brittany Griner. So I love being able to just really have a full conversation with somebody without having to worry about a hard out. I think the second thing is we can be a lot more unvarnished about things like, to go back to Gaza. I mean, this is one of those things where you know, in network television, you really can't say it's a genocide. It's kind of wild. Even though this is an adjudication of the International Criminal Court, you will not hear that said on any cable news. You just won't hear it because there's a prohibition. So it's
Yeah.
like now there's no prohibition. We can say what a thing is. We know what it is. We can say what it is. We can keep it real. And I love being able to do that.
I love that. Everybody, make sure you watch this show 3 times a week. Go and subscribe right now. Get those updates. Make sure you sign up for the subscription and the update so that you can hear about this all the time. You can be reminded of the show. But once you watch it, you won't need reminders, so you will be hooked to it. It's amazing. Great guests, great analysis, everything you love from the old show, plus a whole lot of new stuff that really just accents the brilliance and the genius that Joy Reid is. And I want to say one more thing. It's not just your brilliance and your genius that I love. It's your heart and your courage. When you talked about helping people find jobs after they were let go, that says everything about who you are. And I know that about you without knowing that story, but I want people to understand that that is like one host out of a million. Like, most people aren't worried about that. Most people are worried about their egos, their PR campaigns. They're trying to figure out their next move, whatever. They're not thinking about other people. But you didn't just do that in your formal capacity as a host. You do that in your work as a journalist. You do that in your work as a freedom fighter. You're always trying to look out for the vulnerable, the most vulnerable among us. And I appreciate that. And you've paid a high price for your character and your courage. But I promise you, you'll be rewarded in the end, and you will be part of the story. When the story is told about how we won, you're going to be part of that story. And I hope you know and appreciate how special you are to us.
Well, that means more to me coming from you as one of the bravest brothers, the most bravest people in this industry than you can possibly know, Mark. Because look, I'm following in the lead of people like you. You are so brave, and you've also paid a high price for it. And I think we're in a club now where people think it's a club where, you know, there's a club of regret. No, we're actually proud to be in this club.
That's
you
right.
know, if I'm gonna get fired, don't let me get fired for some BS. You know, we got people getting fired for sexual harassment and
Right.
you know, doing crazy stuff. If you're gonna fire me because I stood on principle. You know what I mean? I stood 10 toes down for the people, for DEI. Yes, I am for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Live with it, deal with it. You know, I believe people in Gaza deserve to have their lives and their children, and I believe people in the West Bank deserve to have their homes and farms, and they can't be taken. And I'm not embarrassed about that. I'm not sorry about it, and I'm not sorry about a single thing that we did on the readout. I'm proud of that show. I will always be proud of that show. I love my team, and they are great, and they're going to be great.
Well, we're proud of you. We love you, and you are already great, and we're gonna keep supporting you. If you ever need us, just holler. We right here.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.